Hey, welcome. This is Lee Waller, and I am working in Unreal Engine 5.7 in the motion design tools. I'm going to take a look at recreating this animation here. This project uses cloners and effectors. Also, the materials are mostly emissive, and there's some camera animation and text animation in this also. So let's jump in. Like I said, I am working in Unreal Engine 5.7, and there is one issue that has come up with the new Substrate materials. When you're working with the motion design tools, the material designer is not working with Substrate. So we're going to have to go in and turn Substrate off when we set up this project. I am going to start a new project. I'm going to go with the film, video, and live events. I'm going to use a blank project, and then of course label this. With the project started, I'm going to make a few adjustments. We are going to need to initialize the motion design plugin. So I'm going to go right here and go into edit and plugins and search for motion design. I'm going to make sure that's enabled. I'm going to close that out for right now. And then I'm going to go back into edit and I'm going to go to project settings and search for Substrate. And I'm going to deselect that right there. And it's going to give me this warning. We'll say OK. And now we are going to restart. After the engine is restarted, I'm going to go up here and I'm going to hit the motion design button right there. That sets us up with our motion design tools. I'm going to make some changes to our scene. I'm going to delete all of this for right now. And I'll add in these defaults. And then I'm going to jump down here and I'm going to set our frame rate to 30 frames per second. And then go ahead and add some time to this. Go right here and go to, let's say we'll make this 10 seconds long. So I'll add 300 frames and I'm just going to hide this right here. The first thing I'm going to do is create a background. You really don't see this, but it has a reflective material to it that helps with a little bit of shadow and then also bouncing the light from the particles that we're going to create. To create this background, I'm going to go over here to 2D shapes and just double click on the rectangle. That'll drop that in and we'll make some changes to this. With that rectangle selected, I'm going to go ahead and label this background. And then drop down here in the details panel and on our mesh size right here, let me drag this out just a little bit. I'm going to set it to free and then we'll set those to 4,000 by 4,000. I'm going to move this a little bit away from the camera. I'm going to set that just to 10 centimeters right there. Just pushes it back a little bit. The way we're going to stack the rest of this, that just gives me some room to work with it. And now I'm going to create a material for this. I'm going to drop down here and right there where it says simple, click on that and go to material designer. And in there, let me bring this over. I'm going to work with the PBR and hit continue on that. And this is why I turned off the substrate, because otherwise we wouldn't have these channels right here. It limited for some reason, and I don't know if that's something they're going to work on and fix, but even the base color was not available with Substrate. So here on the base color, I'm going to select it and I'm going to change this to a solid color and then change this color just slightly. I have a hexadecimal for this, and I'm going to go 0027. 00FF. It's a dark green, and you can adjust that to whatever you want to. I'm going to go OK on that, and then I'm going to change my roughness and metallic. This is the way I like to set these up. I'm going to set both of them to a white color. And then that allows us to adjust them in the channels. So I'm going to go here to the channels, and I'm going to set both of them to 0.5 for this material. And let me just adjust that a little bit. So we're getting just a little bit of reflection off of it, not a lot, but that will work. I'm going to save this material and save this as a new, and let me set up a folder for this right here. New folder, materials, jump in there, and then I'm just going to label this as background material. And we can close that out. I created part of the animation for this using a camera. I also used that camera to create that slanted look for it. So I'm going to go ahead and go into our default scene right here and make some adjustments to the camera. Right here on that camera that's available to us, we're going to need to unlock that. And then we can drop down into the camera settings down here in the details panel. We'll make some adjustments to this. First thing I'm going to do is change the lens. I'm going to go from this universal zoom to a 30mm prime. Here on the location, I'm going to set the X up to 67. And for right now, I'm going to leave the Y at 0. And then I'm going to set this Z at a -665. And we're going to rotate it also. So on the rotation, on the roll, we'll set that to a -58. And the pitch, we'll set that to 33. And then on the yaw, we'll set that to a -44. Up here on the camera settings right here, I'm going to drop down to default view so we can kind of just jump out of this. And after we've jumped into the default viewport, let's also jump out of that camera right there. We'll hit that eject button now. And we're just in the default camera, and let's back out and take a look. And so you can see there's the camera that we're going to use and animate. There's our background, and we're going to add a lot more to this, of course, but this is the angle that it is shooting this background at. I'm going to go back into that camera and we'll start building out the rest of this scene. The majority of this is created using cloners. So I'm going to set up our first one. Over here in cloners, I'm going to double click on the grid, and there is our first cloner in there. I'm going to go to the camera real quick and just slide over so we can see this a little bit better. And this is how we're going to animate it right there on the Y axis. I'll just move that over. And now in my details panel, I'm going to come down to the first cloner, open it up, and I'm going to get rid of this default clone right there. Just select it and hit delete. And I'm going to bring in my own object. I'm going to go here to the 2D shapes and double click on the rectangle and make some changes to this. With it selected, I'll drop down here to the mesh size, and I'm going to set this up to 25 by 4. And to start cloning that, I'm going to grab the rectangle and make it a child of the cloner. Just hover over the cloner like that with it, drop it in, and now you'll see that it's a child and it's starting to produce clones. So we're going to go now into the cloner and we'll make some changes to it. Let's drop down. We're going to leave this on grid. On our count values here, I'm going to set X to 1 and then jump down to our Y, set that to 80, and then set our Z to 20. On the spacing, I'm going to leave that at 105. We'll jump down to Y, set that to 40, and set our Z to 50. We are going to use an effector on this one, but we'll get to that in just a moment. I'm going to go down here first and go to range and enable that. And we have a number of properties here. We'll make some adjustments to those. We're going to turn off the mirror right here, and we'll leave the offset minimum as is, but on the offset max right here, we're going to go 0 on the X. Y right there, we'll bring that up to 1000. And you can see that that's distributing these clones on this Y axis here with a more random distribution. I'm going to make a change to the scale minimum here. I'm going to set that to 0.25. And now we'll add our effector in. I'm going to drop down here and you'll see effector. We'll create a linked effector. And let's make sure that is selected. All of our properties are now for this effector. So we're going to make some changes to it. Let's go right here to shape. And on the shape, we'll move that from a sphere to unbound. That means that it's just going to encompass everything. I'm going to set this color to white and hit OK. And on our mode here, we'll go from offset to procedural. We're going to leave the curl noise on. The scale strength, let's drop down to it. And we'll set it to 0.1. And then on the pan, this is where we're going to actually start getting some motion out of this. We'll set that to 100. And on the frequency here, 1.5. And so you can see that it's affecting the scale of all of these objects, creating an animation. I'm going to create a material now for our clone. So right there on the rectangle, select it. And I'm going to drop down. We'll go from simple to material designer. And in there, we're going to make this an emissive. So I'm just going to go with the PBR and hit continue. And right there on emissive, go there and we're going to change this to a solid color. Let's change the color, and I'll set that hexadecimal to 00A3FFFF. Hit OK on that. After we set that color, let's go into the channels and we'll bring up our emissive strength on this. Let's set that to 10. And now we can save the material right here, save as new. And in our materials folder there, I'm going to label this emissive blue clone. We can close that out now. And just to be on the safe side, I'm going to go to Asset on this, click the drop-down menu, and just make sure that is the one that's selected. And in the content drawer right here, I'm going to save that out. So you can see the look we're starting to create. We're getting some shadows on that background from our particles. And then also by using the emissive property on the material, we're creating some lighting from that. Now that we've created that, I'm going to go ahead and label this cloner underscore blue clones underscore 01. And then on the effector also, I'll label that effector underscore blue clones underscore 01 also. Help us keep everything organized. And if we need to make adjustments, we know what works with what. I'm going to slide this over just a little bit so I have more space here. We'll start setting up a new set of clones. So back here, I'm going to go to cloners and then double click on the grid again. There's our new set of clones, just like we did before. I'm going to drop in there and delete that default clone. Back over here in our 2D shapes, I'll add in another rectangle. We'll make some adjustments to it. Just like we did before, drop down here to the mesh size, make sure that's set to free, and I'll set that to 25 by 4. We already have the material made for that, so I'll go ahead and change that. We'll go from simple to asset, and then we can just jump right there and select that material that we've created. We can drop that now into our cloner. So we'll grab it and make it a child of the cloner. Let's select the cloner and make some adjustments to it now. Again, with grid, we'll go to our X, Y, and Z count. On that, we'll set this to 1 by 80 by 20. And then on our spacing there, we'll do 105 by 40 by 50. Let's go down to range. We'll enable that. Again, like we did earlier, let's disable the mirror. We'll leave the offset minimum as is. On the offset max, we'll just jump right here to the Y, set that to 1000. And then we'll make one more adjustment right here on the X and set that to 500. And then on the scale minimum here, we'll set that to 0.25. And I'm going to drop on down and look at some other properties here. On the spawn of these particles, I'm going to change that from once to infinite. And then here on style, let's change that from instant to rate. And then on the emission rate, let's bring that up to 100. We'll keep those settings as is, but then we also want to adjust the lifetime of these particles so that they die out. So I'm going to enable that lifetime there. We'll keep the minimum at 0.25. I'll bring the max up to 2. And then I'm also going to enable the scale right there. So that they're not landing in the same place as our other particles, I'm going to make a few more adjustments on this. Let's move back up to the top. And right here on the seed, I'm just going to set that to 2. That'll change things up a little bit more. And then a couple of more adjustments. I'm going to rotate this 180 degrees right here on the roll. And then just move this about 20 pixels on the Z-axis there. Let me deselect that now. And now we can see the two sets of particles we've created. I'm going to label this cloner now, and cloner underscore blue clones underscore 02. I'm going to close that one up, and with it selected, I'm going to duplicate it because we'll use another set of it and make some adjustments so that we have some more variation in this. With it selected, I'm going to hit Control D. Now we have our blue clones 3 right there, and I'm going to select the cloner itself, and then I'm just going to reset our location there to 0 and then reset our roll back to 0. And then we can change the seed up a little bit more. We can set that to 1. I'm now going to create a set of clones that will animate moving along the y-axis. So again, over here in Cloners, select that, go to Grid, double-click on it. That'll create our set of clones. And like we've been doing, let's delete that default set of clones. In our 2D shapes right here, this time I'm going to go with a square. Just double-click on it, just to create a little bit different shape than what we've been creating. Let me make sure that's selected. And I'm going to drop down to the mesh size, and we'll set this to 20 by 2. And I'm going to jump back up here, and we're going to set this bevel right here to 1 and the subdivisions to 4. And we'll drop that square now into the cloner. We have a few more changes we need to make to it. We need to add that material to it. So let's drop down, make sure that square is selected, and we'll go from simple to asset, and we'll select that emissive blue right there for the clones. Add that on. Let's go to our cloner and take a look at those properties and make a little more room here. And we'll jump up to our grid settings. We're going to go to 1 on the count there for X. And on the Y, we'll set that to 400. And on the Z, we'll set that to 26. The spacing we'll leave at 105 by 105. And then on the Z right here, we'll set that to 40. And on our range again, let's select it. And we'll deselect the mirror right there. And I'm going to change this offset max right here on the Y to 400. We'll leave the scale uniform enabled. And then on the minimum here, I'm going to set that to 0.1. And we'll leave the max at 1. I'm going to label this cloner real quick. Go with cloner _ blue animated. And to animate this, we're just going to use the Y location right here. And so you can see how we can move that back and forth and animate that. I'm going to go ahead and set that animation up real quick with my timeline indicator right here at the beginning of the sequence. And the value that I want to set for this, I'm going to go ahead and set this to a negative 2000. That pushes them off to this left side. And I'll set a keyframe right there at the beginning. And then we'll jump to the end. And I'm going to change this value right here to 2000. And then we'll hit that keyframe button again. And so we've animated those. Now I want those to be at a constant velocity. So I'm going to select both of those keyframes right there, right click on them and set those to linear. And we watch that through, you'll see they're at a constant rate. There's a few more sets of cloners I want to add in. I have a couple of red lines in here, sets of cloners. I'm going to start working on those. Like we've been doing again, I'll go over here to the cloners and add in that grid. We'll get rid of that default clone. And in our 2D shapes right there, we'll go to rectangle, add one in, begin to make some adjustments to it. On the mesh size, I'm going to change that to 50 by 5 for this first set. And again, just to change up, to make some variation, I'm going to set these slants to 30 on that object. Let's make that rectangle now a child of the cloner so that it begins to clone that. And we'll make some adjustments to the cloner. Select it. And on the location here on our Z value, I'm going to set that to 190 real quick. And let's jump down here to our X, Y, and Z count. Let's set those to 1 by 80 by 1. And on the spacing there, we'll change that Y to 60. Moving on down, we'll enable the range. And we'll set the minimum on the offset on the Y value to 500. We'll leave the maximum as is. And we'll go down here to the scale minimum and set that to 0.5. And then moving on down, let's go down to the spawn. And we're going to change that from once to infinite. And on the style, from instant to rate. And we'll bring this up to 130. And then move on down to the lifetime. We'll select that. And we can set that to 0.5 on the minimum, and on the maximum, we can set that up to 5. Let's enable the scale also. We'll need to create a material for that. So let me go here, select that rectangle. We'll look for the material property on it, change that from simple to material designer. And again, we'll just go with PBR for right now, hit continue. In my base color right there, I'm going to change that to a solid color and then make that white. And we're going to get most of this from the emissive color. We'll change it to also a solid color, and we're going to make this a red color. Select the color, and I have a hexadecimal right there for that. FF002E, FF. We can hit OK. And then back in our channels, we'll bring up that emissive strength quite a bit. Let's bring that up to 25. And now we can save this material. And I'm just going to label that emissive red clones. We can close out the material designer. So there you see those red lines now. And we're getting a lot more light from the red lines. So all of this is easily adjusted on any of the materials or any of the cloners. You can go in and experiment with those values and see what you create. We already have this line and we have most of the work done. So let me go up here and label this cloner underscore red and 01. And so we can duplicate this one, select it, Control D, and now we have our cloner red underscore 2. Let's select the cloner and we'll make a few adjustments to it. On the position, first of all, we'll set that to a -160. And again, the spacing of all of this, feel free to move it around wherever you want to. To make sure they're not exact duplicates of each other, I'm going to change this seed right here, and it doesn't matter what number you use. Any value is going to make it different. It's just the way that they're spawning. That seed is going to make sure that they spawn differently. So this is what we've created so far. I have one more cloner that I want to add in just to create a different shape in there. So with the process we've been going through, let's go up here to cloner. Actually, let me stop this real quick. And we'll go to cloners, grid, double click on it. We'll get rid of that default clone, delete it. Let me bring this up. And with that cloner selected, we'll need to add in the object that we want to work with. We're going to work with a square again on this one. So in our 2D shapes, we'll go back to square. And let me go ahead and make some adjustments on this so we can see it a little bit better. I'm going to round these edges on it. So on the bevel right there, I'm going to bring that up. We may come back to and adjust this in a minute. Set that to 10 for right now. We're going to add a modifier to this rectangle, this square right here. And I'm going to go over here, right up here in the far left corner, you'll see operator stack. If you don't have the operator stack right here, hit that button and it'll open up this operator stack, and we can now add a modifier to this. We want to add the outline modifier. We'll drop right there, add that in. You'll see that's what it does. It kicks out the fill on this and makes just an outline. And let me go back into the outliner, make sure that's selected, that we're working with those properties. And let's bring this down. I'm going to set this to 10 on both. And let me go into the operator stack again, and on that offset, I forgot to set it. Let's bring that down to 3. And I do need to adjust this bevel size a bit, bring that down maybe to 2. Yeah, that looks good. And so now we have this new object that we're going to add in. We can go to the outliner and make that a child of the new cloner. And so we have these rounded rectangles, kind of like zeros in there. And I'm going to label this now cloner underscore rounded rectangles. And I'll do 01 on that. Let's make some adjustments to the cloner. We'll drop down to the count and we'll set the X to 1 and tab down and we'll set the Y to 100, and we can set that Z to 8. On our spacing, we'll leave the X at 105, the Y to 40, and the Z to 100. And like we've been doing, let's enable the range here. We'll leave this enabled. On the offset max right here, we'll set the Y to 50. We're going to leave this enabled, and then we'll bring the minimum down to 0.5. And again, all of these you can adjust and experiment with to create your own look. And on this one, we are going to add an effector to it. So again, we'll go create linked effector, add that in, and that effector is selected. We'll jump up here. I'm going to change this color to white just to be on the safe side. And then we'll make some adjustments to the shape here. We should bring this to unbound so that it affects all of them and not just a particular space. We'll change this to procedural, leave it on curl noise. The scale strength, let's set it to 0.1. And again, on the pan, 100, and the frequency to 1.5. And if those seem either a little too small, you can adjust that scale strength right there a bit higher, work with it. And you can also change the size of that square also to adjust it. Now I'm going to go back to the square, and we need to add that material in. We'll go from simple to asset, and again, the same one we've been using. I'm going to add just a little bit of an accent light up here in this area right here. To do that, I'm going to go to the lights here and add in a spotlight. There's our spotlight. I'll bring that up just a little bit. And let's see, that spotlight's right there. We close things up so we can see this. And then I'm going to go to my location, and actually I'm going to bring this intensity up. I'm going to bring it up to 70. That'll help me see it a little bit better. I'm going to hit the G key right there and make sure that spotlight now is selected. And there is our throw on this. This will help us move this around just a little bit and bring it up here. And let's see. I'll just start navigating it this way. And I'm going to select the rotation tools right here and kind of get that in the angle that I want. Let me turn the snapping off for these. Make it a little bit easier, a little bit smoother, and then bring that back up in place. All right, so kind of in that area, again, this is up to your discretion how you want to add that in, even if you want to add that in. The numbers that I've come close to on this, on the location, is the -50 by -493 by 271. And then on the rotation, a -90 by -33 by 107. I've adjusted my intensity to 70, and then I'm going to change the color of the light. And I'm just going to select that blue right there and hit OK. I want that to follow the animation of the camera, so I'm going to make that a child of the camera. Let me open this up so we can see it. So I'm going to need to bring this to the camera and drop it right there. So I'm going to grab it, drag it up, and drop it right there. And now wherever that camera goes, that spotlight is going to follow. We can now animate the camera. I'm going to make sure that I'm back at the beginning of the timeline for this animation. Make sure that camera is selected. Let's grab our details and bring them up. And again, like we animated that cloner earlier, all we're going to do is use the Y value on this to animate the camera. And you can see that that light is following along right with it. We made that background 4,000 by 4,000. So there's the edge of it. So I'm going to start right there on that edge, have it completely in camera right there. And I'm just going to start with that value on the location, and we'll add in a keyframe property. By clicking that keyframe property, we add that camera into our sequencer down here. Let me just make some room for you to see this. If you're not familiar with this, once you add your first camera in, you're going to be adding in also a camera cuts. We're only going to use one camera on this, so we're not really going to use this, but we'll leave it in there. This is just so if we had multiple cameras, this is where we would cut from one camera to the next when that shot came up. So with that camera in there, you'll see now we'll jump down to the transform properties, and there is where we have set those keyframes for location. We're only using the Y, but we'll go ahead and set the keyframes for the others also. I'm just going to jump down here to the very end of the sequence, and then we'll just drag this back to the other end and make sure that we have that in there also, and then set our second keyframe. Now, I don't want these easing in and out, so I want them at a constant rate. So I'm just going to select all of them, right-click on it, and go up to linear. And that'll set all of them to linear. And now we can go back to the beginning of the timeline. And let me make some more room on this so we can see it better. And we'll hit play. So that's how we're getting the look of two different directions. The camera's moving in one direction with the majority of the particles going in that direction, and then we have that one set of particles going in the opposite direction. To add a little more to this, I added in 2 text layers, and you can add in all kinds of different things into this animation. But I added in these text layers, so I'm going to go here to Actors, and for my first text layer, let me see, I'm going to move maybe around right in here. This should be this is where all of our cloners are positioned here in the middle, so this is where our text should show up. So with the actors selected right there, I'm going to go and double click on text actor, and we'll drop it in. So with that, I'm going to reset our location and our rotation there, and that is our 0 position. To create the look that I have for those, we'll make some adjustments to this text. First thing, I'm going to go ahead and change this to digital, all caps right there. Select it, and then the font. I'm going to click on it, and I'm going to drop down. Hopefully you can choose whatever font you have, but I used Century Gothic on this. I liked that, looked pretty good. And then I'm going to change the weight of it to bold. And I love this that they've added this in 5.7. We now have a font size. Rather than having to scale it up and scale it down, this makes it a little bit more uniform with other applications. I'm going to bring that up to 96. And move on down. I'm going to center this up on alignment right there on the horizontal and vertical alignment. Then we'll move on down to geometry here, and I'm going to set this extrude to 2. We'll use outline right there, and I'm going to set our outline to 2. And on this first one, I do want the fill on it. So I'm going to go right here and change the type from stroke to fill. And we'll leave everything else as is. We're going to need to create a new material for this. So with the text selected, let's go up here to Material Designer and click on it. And you'll see that it is looking at that text, and it wants a front material, a bevel material, extrude, and back material. We'll go ahead and go with the front material first. We'll create it. Again, PBR, hit OK, and hit Continue right there. I'm just going to make this a dark reflective material. So on the base color, I'm going to change that to a solid color right there, and click on the color. And the hexadecimal I have on that is 005259FF. 005259FF. We'll close that out, and I'm going to make adjustments to my roughness and metallic. Set both of those to white. And now in our channels right here, I'm going to set this roughness to 0.1, and we should be able to leave our metallic as is, and you'll see that we have a reflective material, dark reflective material there. I'm going to save this, save as new, and like we've been doing, I'm going to label this dark reflective, and we can close that out. Once we've created that material, I'm going to go here and actually select that, make sure that that is applied. And for the material that we'll be using on the bevel, extrude, and back, I'm going to go over here to the content drawer, and I'm going to make sure that that new one is saved right there. I'm actually just going to work off of this emissive. I'm going to grab it, drag it out to the side, make a copy of it, select it, and hit save. And we know that this is the emissive blue clones 1. With it selected, I'm going to go back to my text now, and then I'm just going to click here on these 3. Now with our materials applied, we'll go ahead and continue building this out. We're going to duplicate this. I'm first going to bring this up because you can see that we're intersecting with some of the clones. So on that text layer, let's bring that up just a little bit. Let's set that for right now, maybe to a -6. That'll bring it up. And then what we'll do is we're going to duplicate this, and I'll label it first, text underscore digital underscore 01. We're going to have 2 layers for this, and I'll select it and duplicate it, Control D. So on the second layer there, I'm going to select it and bring it down to maybe a -2. Maybe even drop that down to 0 because we're not going to really see it intersecting with the other. And then I'll make some changes to it. I'm going to drop down and we're going to look for right here in the geometry. We're going to go without the fill. We'll just go with the stroke on that one. And then let's bring the outline up to 5. And that just kind of sets it a little bit larger than the top layer and creates the look that I have on the original. I'm just going to select in here, hit the G key so I can get rid of all of that just to take a look at what we've got. Now I do need to, before I animate this, I need to make sure that this second layer is a child of the first layer. So we'll grab it and just drop it right there. And that way we can just animate this top layer and the bottom layer will stay right with it. To animate this, I'm going to bring this back to close to the beginning. And let's see where I'll start maybe this animation coming in right here about ½ a second in. Well, I'll go ahead and give it to a full second. And then let me bring this in again. These animations are pretty simple because of the way this is built out. We'll just start bringing that text in until we get it just outside of the view right there. And we can set our first keyframe right there. And let's do maybe 1.5 seconds on this. It'll come on in and we'll just bring that more to the center, about, say right there. We'll hit that keyframe. And then we could give that maybe another 1.5 seconds. And so that it stays somewhere right in there where we want it, I'll just bring that back in and hit another keyframe. And then we'll move it out kind of quick. We'll do just another second there to move that on out. And we can hit that last keyframe. So we'll go back now and take a look at that animation. All right, that's looking pretty good. In a few minutes, we can take a look at that in the curve editor right there and see if we can smooth that out just a little bit. I want to go ahead now and set up our second text. So I'm going to select that. And rather than going through that whole process again, we'll just duplicate this. And so now we have those 2 texts, and we'll go look for them real quick back here. And I'm going to delete these right here in the red, and we'll change these now to our second word. Let me select the second text and do the same for it. And we'll grab the main parent right there and we'll start dragging that down. And let's move on past this animation, give ourselves just a little bit of time. Make sure that's out. We'll start the second animation somewhere right in there. Let me drag this onto this side, make it similar to the first animation. We'll set that keyframe to start that animation. It adds that in. And like we did before, we'll bring this up to maybe 1.5 seconds and bring that on in. Set that keyframe, again, another 1.5 seconds. Bring that down. Set our keyframe. and then we'll move it out a little more quickly, and there's our last keyframe on that animation. So let's go take a look at the whole thing now. Jump back to the beginning. All right, and I know that we'll set this first keyframe right here on both of these to linear so that they're not easing in on those animations. And we can probably do the same on the out for both of those animations. Let's take a look at that. So it comes on in. And if you do want to work with these, especially these two right here on the animation and how they ease in and out, you can go into the keyframe editor and look for those animations and adjust them here using their handles to smooth them out however you might want to, so you can experiment with those. But the way they've ended up, I'm happy with them, the way that they're moving. So you have both of those there. I'm going to close that out. Now, the final touch on this is I did go into the post-process volume and make some adjustments there. So let me go to it. Right there is our post-process volume. And that's just a final processing on everything, on creating the look for this. I have it selected, and I'm going to take a look at a few things. First, I'm going to add in some bloom. So I'm just going to select the bloom right there and add that in, and we'll go with the intensity. And you can see already we're getting a little bit more glow out of our lighting. I'll drop down to the convolution here and check the intensity right there. And then drop into our scatter dispersion, select it, and bring that up to 20. And then one other thing that I added in, and all of this stuff you can play around with to your liking, but I also added in lens flares on this. And I'm just going to select the intensity right there. And again, you're welcome to experiment with those, but I felt like that worked well. So let's go take a look at our animation now. With an animation like this, you can adjust any of these properties we worked with, experiment with them, create different shapes with the cloners, add in more cloners, all different types of things to adjust this to your liking. I hope this has been helpful. For more on digital content creation, hit the like and subscribe button and check out my other tutorials.